Welcome to McGuire on Wrestling.
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let's give the people what they want. Professional wrestling
With Mike McGuire.
The happiest Canadian camper in the world.
Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Give me a hell yeah.
It is so good to be back with you with a regular show. Back from, I gotta say, complete vocal annihilation. You'll hear some of what I was going into the show with last week with our conversation with former WWE champion, once known as Jinder Mahal, now the Maharaja, Raj Dhesi. That's going to be up for you today, but first of all, thank you for coming back. I know last week, the best of, I never really like to go on the best of train unless I have to. I think that's the only time with the McGuire on Wrestling brand for sure, minus maybe even the Holiday Hullabaloo, though, that we did last year wasn't really a best of. It was new content, holiday content with wrestlers and past hosts and guests and friends. And so, yeah, I've never really done a full, here is a show in the can sort of version. But for those of you that checked it out, maybe reminisced on some of those interviews, thank you for that. And for those of you that wanted to wait until we were back with new stuff, I appreciate that as well. Do me a favor, if you're back, spread the word. McGuire's back, voice is back, show is back, and we got a loaded one for you today. Tons went on this week in wrestling, tons went on in sports entertainment. Some of you were very vocal about your opinions about a certain event that happened on Friday night. We're going to talk about that and a bunch more on the show today. Plus, we are loaded with guests. Okay, Dave Meltzer actually away this week, but don't worry. From the Wrestling Observer, this guy comes on every once in a while, and he's always great. Josh Nason and I are going to dive specifically into AEW. This past week's Dynamite had a lot of fans kind of shaking their heads going, okay, we still want you to do well, AEW, but we kind of don't know what's going on right now. And I think that's a fair statement for a lot of fans. And I think it's a fair statement for a lot of viewers and critics as well. So we're going to get Josh's side on things. Josh focuses a lot on the AEW products specifically and does it in a way that, you know, sometimes Dave gets ragged on for being biased. If you listen to him on this show, you know that's really not the case. I've managed to actually get Dave to speak out quite a bit about things in an honest and fair manner. And I think that sometimes it's just based on who he's having the conversation with too, because he knows some people want to talk more about this and the other, but Josh is a guy who goes maybe another 5,000-10,000 feet above, you know, and looks at the whole thing. So we'll get his thoughts on that. Plus some of your feedback. AEW, is it still doing it for you? Isn't it? What is right? What is wrong? And what would you like to see happen for the future? The Survivor Series card is building up. Is Seth Rollins going to assist the Bloodline now that Bronson Reed is on the side of the new Bloodline? What? Seth Rollins being the fifth guy for Team Bloodline? Really? I don't know about... Where's Braun Strowman? Is he still hurt? We'll talk about that coming up as well. Plus, he is the biggest fan of the pugilism in our Team MOW, McGuire on Wrestling umbrella. My good friend Joe Aguinaldo and I are going to talk all about the Tyson Paul Netflix streaming event that got hiccuped for a lot of viewers with buffering issues for a large portion of that show. But was the show really worth all the hype, though? A lot of people are saying kinda nah. Plus, is there a moral ambiguity among fans when it comes to people like Mike Tyson these days? I saw some comments from some of you on the boards, and I agree 100%. I think that there's maybe a little too much glossing over of some things, but we'll get your thoughts on that as well. And Joe and I will go through that entire event. AEW's Full Gear is taking shape, and a lot more. But first, here are some of the big stories of the week. It is the 5 count.
You want to hear the breaking news?
Well, let's start off with some WWE news. Cody Rhodes making the rounds and was asked about what he knows about Dwayne Johnson, or The Rock, showing up at WrestleMania 41 this year. Of course, there's been a ton of rumors circulating about whether or not The Rock will be involved in any sort of main event. And this is what Cody had to say to Adrian Hernandez of the Unlikely podcast.
I know when he comes back, I know who he'll come looking for, I know what to expect. But what I can say about WrestleMania 41 is keep the rumors going, keep them churning, enjoy the discourse, but I think what you will get will surprise you all.
Well, speaking of Cody Rhodes, his protege, someone who fans have been asking a lot about as of late as to where is he exactly, Ricky Starks has announced he will be making his return to the ring coming up at Glory Pro Wrestling's WrestlePocalypse, and that is coming up on Sunday, November 24th, the day after AEW's Full Gear. So while it's clearly a safe bet, he's probably not doing anything for Full Gear. Here's what he had to say about the appearance and his opponent, Cody Lane.
I used to actually live in St. Louis, and I used to live in Melville, of all places. And so I thought it was a good way to make a return. And also, too, I've known Cody for quite a bit. He used to train here in Texas. And I said, well, why not? Why not just come back and, test the grit against somebody that I'm very much familiar with.
That audio comes from the Claibs Online podcast. Also appearing on that show in St. Louis, GCW mainstay Effie, Danhausen, and Allie Katch, to name a few. As we found out, the WWE Women's United States Championship is now a thing, and the tournament is set to conclude on Saturday night's main event on December the 14th. Now, Bayley is the first woman to advance in the tournament. However, there is a lot of speculation as to who could be in the final. There's also been word as of late that Becky Lynch might be returning to WWE, perhaps even before the Royal Rumble. Just saying, big network event, new championship, could be interesting things. Of course, Bayley was one half of the first women's tag team champions in WWE with Sasha Banks back in 2019. Becky Lynch was the first SmackDown women's champion when that title was created back in 2016. Well, we're going to be talking a lot about AEW this week, but with missing the show last week, I thought it was a perfect time to bring up the Kenny Omega potential return. And he's now saying that Gabe Kidd is not who he wants to have his return match against. At least that's what he's saying now. Of course, Omega made a return appearance to New Japan Pro Wrestling recently, even getting a little active with Kidd. Now, it is being hinted that Omega could be returning to the ring at the combined New Japan AEW Wrestle Dynasty show, which takes place the day after Wrestle Kingdom. Of course, no official announcements have been made, so we'll just have to stay tuned. Maybe we get something alluded to it this weekend at Full Gear. Who knows? And this is a little more centric to the area I'm in, but he's also the guest of this week's show. After the interview we conducted, Raj Dhesi is now the Stu Hart Heritage Heavyweight Champion in Dungeon Wrestling. He defeated the Masterpiece, Chris Masters, Chris Adonis, for the championship in a great match. Of course, those will be coming to YouTube soon. But stick around as you'll hear the conversation I had with Raj before the show coming up and find out what some of his future plans in pro wrestling are since leaving WWE by choice. Still lots to come on the show, including that chat with Raj Dhesi, as well as Joe Aguinaldo and I go through the Tyson and Paul event that happened on Friday night. But coming up next from the Wrestling Observer, Josh Nason and I are going to go through AEW, what's been working, what needs help, and where things stand in his eye as an analyst of the brand next.
If you're here, you're a part of Team MOW. Join us on Facebook at Team MOW McGuire on Wrestling and get in on the conversation. This is McGuire on Wrestling. If you like McGuire on Wrestling, you need to subscribe to the free McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed. Not only do you get access to the show a day early, but you also get free bonus content every week. Share a laugh with Mitch and Dimitri on the alternate commentary table.
Oh, I'm Cody Rhodes. Look at me.
Now, if this was Damian Priest, he'd apologize. He probably would have apologized.
Follow along with the film career of one of wrestling's biggest stars with We've Seen a Movie.
Basically, I'm just watching John Cena play his wrestling character.
If John Cena was a raging alcoholic Atlantic City mooch before this.
Get all these shows, exclusive interviews, and more for free by subscribing to McGuire on Wrestling, wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back. to McGuire on Wrestling.
Dave Meltzer's away this week, so I always like to try and bring in some different viewpoints, some different voices, and one of them also associated with the Wrestling Observer, as well as several other places you can find his work. Josh Nason is back. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing good. I'm a little tired. I'm not used to this staying up so late 2 nights in a row for fighting. Usually it's pro wrestling or other things. But boy, back-to-back nights with Mike Tyson, Jake Paul, and then UFC last night. I won't use the word because I know we're on the radio, but as Murtaugh said in Lethal Weapon, I'm getting too old for this stuff, you know?
Yeah, yep. Did you ever play the Lethal Weapon video game that came out for like Super Nintendo?
I'm sure I did.
Yeah, because they actually have the audio of him saying that line, but it just stops at, "I'm getting too old for this." And then it just dies, right?
Yeah. My favorite in that vein of like words when they try to change a word is watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off on like TBS or something like that, and they say instead of the S word they say tin. This piece of tin, and it's like tin. It like completely is like done after the fact. So I remember that growing up and being like, that just sounds weird. Then you see the real movie in like VHS, and you're like, oh yeah, it's not what they said at all.
What an insult, too. You useless piece of tin.
Yes.
Probably one of the most useful materials in the modern era, but sure.
Exactly.
All right, man. Well, I brought you on because on your wrestling beat specifically, when you're, and I'll give you credit for staying up for one night of fighting and one night of whatever. Sure. We'll talk about that in just a bit here as Joe Aguinaldo is standing by to talk also about the Tyson versus Paul night. But I brought you on this week because there's a lot of people talking about AEW, people in our own group here on the Team MOW McGuire on Wrestling page, equally saying the same thing now. Guys who do other pods on our feed are kind of questioning the same thing. Guys like John Moxley, others have come out and said, AEW is in a hard reset. Fans are saying it's confusing, it's not enticing. Where's the stars? I mean, I don't want to sit here and beat on AEW either. And we had that agreement beforehand. We weren't going to drag them through the mud on this because, again, more wrestling is good wrestling because it's better for everybody. More options, more wrestlers working. So I guess, first of all, before we go into the what's not working, what would you, as someone who tracks AEW, say has been going well for them in the last month or two here?
Yeah, the shows are eminently watchable. It's not like WCW head scratching at the end when you were just kind of like, what is this, right? Or WWE during some of the McMahon era in the last 20 plus years when you're just like, this is work to get through. Most shows, at least for Dynamite, is not work to get through. I don't think so.
Right.
Collision. Sometimes it is, but then again, you're watching the show and it's like it's a Saturday night. Like, are you doing other things? Or like, I think sometimes in those like more leisure nights, like Friday, Saturday nights, when you're kind of like, I've other things I could be doing. Do I have to be watching this? Rampage is just a completely other animal altogether now. But yeah, the things they have been doing good are the shows are still entertaining and for the most part logical, in terms of where they're going. I think they've been really building these pay-per-views really well, stuff that makes sense. And, there's certain things you can kind of squabble with along the way. But for the most part, I think we're looking at next Saturday or this Saturday as we're talking with Full Gear. Everything makes sense, and I think from a talent standpoint, they're in a good direction. They're going to get a lot of guys back healthy, knock on wood here in the next, 3 to 4 or 5 months. And then going to be at full staff, So I think that's really intriguing. So yeah, they do a lot of good things. Some things you wish it kind of did better, but they're in a position where they're behind the big dog in WWE, and they've never felt bigger, and that's tough. That's tough.
I'm just going through the card here for Full Gear as announced to date, including a 0-hour match. We have 10 matches already, as AEW tends to do. They'll probably add 1 or 2 more this week because that's just what Tony Khan likes to do, is load up a card here. You know, it's funny, as you say that, things are making sense and we're seeing the feuds progress on Dynamite. Collision is a totally different story, especially for those of us based in Canada, where it is very hard to watch Collision here. It's very difficult to find. Honestly, if you really want to watch and don't want to subscribe to one particular network's feed, then basically you're going by ill-gotten means to find it. So it's not really a show that we talk about a lot here, but Collision has been interesting if you have been paying attention. It's almost like a throw anything in the wall and see if it sticks show at this point.
Yeah, it's the wrestling's not bad on it. You know, again, it's just how much AEW content can you take in a given week, and that again, it goes with the other wrestling you're watching and things like that. There's the sickos, you know, as they're called, and they'll take in. There's like, give me more of everything. But if you're, you know, watching WWE content, AEW content, you're watching, going to indies and being involved with that stuff, checking out TNA, you know, if you're really jonesing for something, you know, NWA, MLW, I guess. I mean, and that's not even mention all the old stuff as well. If someone's like, someone sees a clip on X or something, and they're just like, I want to go check out that old Stan Hansen versus Bruiser Brody match. And then all of a sudden you get into a rabbit hole on YouTube. There's no shortage of stuff that people can watch. So it just, does it feel necessary or not? And I think them going down to 5 hours, going down to 4 hours from 5 hours in January when Rampage goes away, I think that's good. But it's making the shows feel important, and some sort of natural brand split makes a lot of sense, especially when they get everyone kind of back at full strength. So, yeah, we'll see where that goes. From a touring perspective, it's tough because, you know, it's hard for them to fill up a building on Wednesdays, right?
Yeah.
Now you're asking to go 2 a week. That's probably going to be a little bit more difficult.
So let's go back to Full Gear here for a second, and there is a pretty decent amount of unique matchups here, but I need to lead with the main event on this thing here, because this to me is what every pay-per-view, every big show should be based on, what people are wanting to see the most. Jon Moxley versus Orange Cassidy. Now, Dave Meltzer himself on this show, I asked him, is Orange Cassidy the guy to be betting the farm on here? And Dave's answer was, well, we need a match. and I said, okay. But again, when you have guys like, well, for example, the Hurt Syndicate coming in, who I will say, this show is very MVP biased. He's a buddy I've known for a bunch of years, and I want to see this guy do nothing but make money and keep doing what he loves doing. And then what Bobby and Shelton did, I feel they got robbed in WWE during the pandemic era when they basically kept that company afloat for months. So I will say that there's a little bit of bias there. However, when you've got guys like that coming in, when you've got guys like Will Ospreay, when you've got guys like Swerve Strickland, Orange Cassidy being in your main event for the title, and nothing against Orange Cassidy. I loved the gimmick. I like the guy's efforts. You know, he has changed since doing the whole King of Sloth style thing now, and they seem to be trying to make him seem like an actual contender. But is this the guy you really put in a main event for your championship to sell a pay-per-view?
At this point, you do. Yeah. Because, I mean, you look at it, it's all storyline based, right? So the, where we are at with this Death Riders kind of takeover, whatever you want to call it, where we're leading to is like months away, right? And the issue is that they don't want to burn off these top guys early on. They need someone with legitimacy to challenge for a title. They want to have a title match, right? So Cassidy makes a lot of sense. If the goal is, I don't think it doesn't feel like the goal is to go with Darby as your guy, and if so, that's going to be like a ways away, and that's why I don't really think that's going to happen. My guess, and I'm been talking this with Jason Powell this past week. I think it's where I brought this up. Eddie Kingston seems to be like, that's going to be your not your next champion, but your next, like, could this happen? But depending on when he comes back, I'm thinking we're talking like early 2025.
Right.
So I don't mind Cassidy in this spot. They're going to have great matches, and here's the thing. Their baseline for pay-per-views is like pretty stable. Obviously, you see the spike that they have for All In back in August, but generally you're looking at like 105 to 120,000 depending on the event and all those type of things. You can you have some house money to play with in that you're like, I'm not looking to spike a pay-per-view here. What I'm doing is trying to provide a good show for my core fan base, and that they're not going to be like, wow, this is just not it. And when I'm looking at this card, like I think this is it. I think this is good. So I'm fine with it because the Death Riders versus AEW locker room angle, or however you want to phrase it, we're so far away from where it's kind of culminating to. It's still in its early stages that I'm okay with it because I don't know who the other logical choice is, but I think early part of next year, I think you're going to get some much bigger pursuers for the world title. It's going to make it feel bigger.
And that's fair. I mean, yeah, you're right. The storyline does back this up, but I mean, I can go back to Bret Hart having a match against the 1-2-3 Kid, and it was a great match, and people were blown away by it, and people still talk about that match to this day. But it wasn't the main event of a pay-per-view. It was a Monday Night Raw. You know what I mean? So
yeah, but we also, I don't know if we're sure this is going to be the main event or not, and we've seen that before where they've had this maybe the second to the last. Like they've been really good at like what's the biggest attraction on the show. As of now, I don't know if one sticks out more than the other. I mean, the gutsy thing would be to do Ospreay and Fletcher in the main event.
Just what I was thinking, yeah.
And maybe have this open the show or a co-main event. It's kind of, but it's also like, again, what's the feeling that you're going to leave fans with? Is there any surprise coming out the end? You know, because, you know, if Moxley wins, which I think everyone assumes is going to happen, you're kind of ending on that heel dynamic. And if there's just a beatdown or something like that, may not really be necessarily the thing you want to leave your fans with, or just that feeling, unless someone's coming back, and then all of a sudden it's just that kind of like that goes up to the right, so to speak.
Well, look what happened with Danielson, though. I mean, that was exactly the feeling everybody had coming out of that pay-per-view. It was like, I know.
Yeah, I know. That wasn't the greatest feeling. But yeah, I think you can get away with those once a year, maybe twice a year. I think back-to-backs would be a little tough to do that on.
Okay, where do you think the Swerve Strickland-Bobby Lashley match fits in this thing? Because for me, if you were going to start a show with anything, like if you wanted to do the hot start, that to me would be the big one, because we haven't seen Lashley actually wrestle in AEW yet. We haven't seen him wrestle in months. And Swerve Strickland, I mean, they're starting to really, you know, try and put a fire under him. I don't know if his forward promo was the most effective thing with the Bobby Lashley full gear, but it got the match set, and here we are. So, I mean, there is a curiosity factor. Do you start that match at the beginning of the show, or do you maybe save that one for later as well?
I think maybe you save that for after the champagne celebration thing, because that's not good. I think it's going to lead to a return. Tony Storm, so a good pop there, and then kind of lead into it. But I think that, or maybe after the tag team 4-way, I could see one of those where you kind of need a bump back up. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if they end with Moxley and Cassidy after all, I think maybe you open the show with Ospreay and Fletcher, but you're also saying the bar where you're going so high up that you're going to have a natural dip no matter what. But it's just a question of, will that be too much? Because you're like, wow, this was off the charts, which I think most people think it's going to be. Yeah, it's a good question. And also it depends on what gets added this week. We get Takesha and Ricochet, which most people expect. That's going to be really great. You could open the show with that too. They have a lot of good options for where to kind of slot in. Again, it's like, I'm not worried about the opener as much as like, how do you want people to feel at the very end? And I assume Lashley's going to win. And probably should. So how is that done? Is there something at the end that kind of twists in? Yeah, there's some intrigue there, but it's always kind of fun trying to figure out where they're going to slot things and what feeling they're going to leave the fans with at the end of the night.
I stand corrected. We currently have 9 matches and a champagne celebration announced. I was just counting the lines on the match list here. They have actually listed the champagne celebration in the match card. So I was like, okay, fair enough. So, right. And that's got to be it. Tony coming back, and obviously there's going to be some fun fire there. I mean, I love what Tony's been doing with her time away. I think the stuff she did with Japan and Mexico was fantastic. And it'll be fun to see her come back for sure. Okay, We've talked about Full Gear a bit here. I mean, the whole card, you've got Adam Page, Jay White, you've got MJF with Roddy Strong and presumably Adam Cole. You've got Mercedes Moné with Chris Statlander for the TBS Championship. The tag match you talked about a little bit there with Private Party versus the Acclaim versus the Kings of Black Throne versus the Outrunners. Just a lot of humanity in that one. Is there a sleeper match here you think could steal the show? Jack Perry, Daniel Garcia as well as in there. Is there one of these you're looking to steal the show above anything else?
I mean, I think assuming we get, Osprey Fletcher, that's a win. I think Cassidy and Moxley will be a win based on what they've done in the past. Yeah. They're familiar with each other. They had that match at All Out in the last year with the post CM Punk firing, where it was kind of a rally behind AEW moment, right? You remember? So after All In, he gets fired, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, we need something here. And it was kind of they had a really fun match. That was good. So I'm not worried about that one. I assume Takeshita Ricochet gets out of this week. That'll be great. I think the 4-way is going to be really solid. I think there's a lot of different dynamics. You mentioned a lot of humanity in that match, but also a lot of different personalities. I think the Outrunners are obviously on a nice little run right now. You compare that with House of Black, which is two different personalities there. Yeah, you have the Champions and Private Party who are going to start trying to establish themselves as something in this, and then the Acclaimed who really needs something different. It's just, I was watching Collision last night. Been watching for a while. Obviously, it's a tired act. They need something else because right now it's flatlined, and so
when it fell fast, didn't it? Like it
did. Well, there was one. It's that the raps and all that stuff, and there's an entertainment value there, but there's also a point just like, what else do you got? And it just wasn't that trios run. I thought was more damaging than helpful. Put it that way. That run with Billy Gunn, the titles and all, it just didn't feel right, and I think that definitely hurt them quite a bit.
So we're talking to Josh Nason here, writer for the Wrestling Observer, as well as several other columns. We'll talk more about that as we wrap things up with here. But before we do that, we've talked about Full Gear, AEW's build up towards things. Again, these matches, AEW's pay-per-view has never been a problem. But the problem that we have noticed and a lot of fans have talked about is making it through the weekly TV can be a bit of a slog. There's been some criticisms from other people out there saying that you have to be Tony Khan to understand some of these storylines because we're not getting all the details ironed out on the screen. So where do you think AEW needs to look to improve? And I'm going to offer one suggestion here, agree or disagree. Is something as easy as dumbing it down a bit, maybe simplifying the storylines an option at this point?
Yeah, I think the big thing is they just don't feel cool, right? They don't feel like a cool promotion. And it's very WWE light in some ways, which I don't think you want to be. I think you want to differentiate yourself. And, Tony Khan forever has talked about them being the challenger brand, the second brand. And, they're 5 years into this thing. Essentially, they're still a startup. And so your startup should be able to make bold choices because you're trying to kind of get to that next level. I don't feel that anymore. It's more measured choices in the past, 2 years or so. And I think that's been a big thing. WWE always being super hot, and they feel like celebrities want to be involved with them, and just production, they just feel, and having, packed houses helps a lot. When you have that environment and those people, and this is what I've been saying for a while. Davis says before, I don't think it's a Mr. Anyone that AEW should run smaller buildings and create more of a feel at home of this is the place to be. I think running the Hammerstein for Collision coming up in January, I think that's a great start. If you're going to sell less tickets, fine, but try to create that smaller set and just that, I would say, that ECW feel. But I remember, you watch ECW shows from back in the day, and just these people are just going nuts the entire time, and they have that energy. As a viewer, you feel that energy, like, I want to be in that. I can be at a show and sit on my hands and watch and think, this is awesome, and chant those things. But if it feels like you're one in 3,000 in a 10,000 seat or 15,000 seat building, it doesn't feel as like place to be seen type of thing. So I think that will help. The storylines, I don't find them so confusing or so hard to follow that there's a lot of them. I just look at this thing like, do I feel like this is a hot thing that's cool to watch and other people are like gravitating towards it? It's been so much of a difference the past couple of years from where it was the first few years where it felt anything can happen. I don't get that feeling anymore. And I think that's when all these jokes about restoring the feeling. And I think they have to be careful kind of going back to this restoring the feeling. It's not like it used to be, all this stuff, because then people are going like, oh yeah, it isn't. So why am I still watching it? It's kind of a weird thing there. And yeah, they have some interesting decisions to make roster wise, how much, the Jericho thing, I think there's a lot of people are kind of fatigued on that. And when you bring in other XWB people, like it has that feeling of like, what's new here? What is it? What are we doing? I think it's a very, he's 53, I think, and he can still go, but I wonder how much of an investment you want to make there long-term versus, okay, we still got to start really making this shift. There's some interesting decisions to make roster-wise for sure.
It was about this time last month we were all going, well, Shane McMahon's going to be there now. Do you foresee that ever coming?
I don't, but I'd be certain. And actually, Brandon Thurston made a great point of this on my podcast on Friday. Tony Khan is very big on perception and very big on that he's the guy in charge, which could be a reason for a lot of the other issues and problems and so on. And do you want to bring in the son of Vince McMahon and have perception to the outside world, the non-hardcore wrestling fan, that you needed to bring in a McMahon? It would certainly be great for eyeballs. It would certainly be great for interest of what's he doing. But I think there would be this perception, and I didn't even think of this till Brandon mentioned it, that there's perception that he's helping run the business. And I don't think Tony Khan wants that. So I don't think they need him. I think, but it would be, from a creative standpoint, it'd be super fascinating to have the son of Vince McMahon on a competitor product. That would be incredibly interesting. Just like having Goldberg there would have been incredibly interesting, for one or two matches. So yeah, I don't think so, but I think it's because there would be a concern of, I think from Tony Khan, and I agree with this, that he's not running the show. You needed to bring Shane McMahon in, and that's why I don't think it'll happen.
When you put it that way, that makes all the sense in the world. Josh, Nason, before we go, we said we were going to talk about it. You watched the big Tyson Paul card on Friday. I don't need a blow-by-blow analysis. I don't need a match-by-match analysis. I wrote a small thing up yesterday saying that we are being tailored towards a culture of what used to be appointment viewing is now disappointment viewing. And we're to a point now where we are building up such a false hope in our own narratives when we go to watch a show that when something like that finally happens, do you think that maybe we as fans of combat sport or anything need to be a little more picky when it comes to this? Or is this just going to be a case where the freak shows keep winning and money keeps being made?
I think we are, and especially people of a certain age, I'll put myself in this, we remember appointment event viewing, communal viewing. We're all watching the same thing. That's why the Super Bowl is so big, no matter what team's playing it.
Yep.
As a collective, we're all watching the same thing. It doesn't happen that much anymore. Popular shows, things like that, but people are watching at different times. Hey, have you watched this season? No, I'm on this one. You want to be able to talk about the same thing at once, and that's what we used to have. That was Friday was the closest thing we've had to that since God knows how long. Probably the Super Bowl, right? In terms of just, even if casual fans that want to see Mike Tyson, had so many people on social media, Facebook and stuff like that. Oh, he's going to land one shot. He's going to do this. It's like, no, he's not. But a lot of people thought that. And again, Netflix, you weren't paying for it, so you could just watch it. There's certainly like you can only have so many at bats when you provide that type of output.
Yeah,
that people are going to be like, I don't think there's much there left with the Tyson squeezing the more juice out of that. I just think people saw it. They're like, there was nothing there to believe. We want to go see him again. We want to watch this again. And I think with the Jake Paul thing, it's just not that like, I think he's over with a certain group, but again, how many more times can you do this and have people be interested in it? And I guess we're going to find out, but it's for Tyson, there wasn't even that moment of like one swing, one shot, take me back to the 80s and all of a sudden transports us back. there wasn't that. I think that was the biggest bummer. That and the fact that, we kept getting the buffering and the bad video quality and all that. So it was, I don't know if it was a win. I think it was a win probably for Netflix in terms of like they get a lot of data and a lot of things to figure out.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It didn't leave me with the best feeling. It's kind of just like, air out of the balloon.
Josh Nason, always great to catch up with you. But before we let you go here, where can people find Josh Nason and all your works? Sure.
Yeah, I work for WrestlingObserver.com, so you can follow us on Twitter. I'm Josh Nason on Twitter. Also, I have a Blue Sky account. I've been just posting stuff on there, not a ton of stuff. Again, every new social media people flock toward to kind of get their handle squared away.
Yeah.
So, I do Josh Nason's Punch Out. I am this week kicking off my Pro Wrestling Year in Review series. 12 episodes, covers every single month a different guest. And we go deep dive, usually an hour plus on all these topics, stuff that you're like, at the time, felt like it meant something. But then you're just like, oh, I forgot all about it. We go through all that stuff in detail. Every big promotion, passing, signing, everything in between. My third year doing it, so you can get that on WrestlingObserver.com.
All the best, and hope to talk to you again soon, my friend. Thank you.
Will do. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to McGuire on Wrestling. To be a part of the show, follow our social media or leave a tip. Head to McGuireShow.com. This is McGuire on Wrestling.
You got to stream the alternate commentary table. Every single Saturday, it's brought to you on the McGuire on Wrestling feed. I'm one half of your host, Dimitri Karolis, and I'm here with my partner, Mitch Hondras. Mitch, what is the alternate commentary table?
It's simple. It's the perspective of wrestling from the other side of the railing, the real fans.
That's right, the perspective that you need. You might have a little bit of fun, too. The alternate commentary table. Subscribe free now to the McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed wherever you get your podcast.
Cha-cha!
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
Well, normally we don't talk a lot about boxing on here, but let's face it, was it really a boxing event that took place on Friday for Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul? 72,000 is what they're saying were in attendance at the AT&T Stadium, which of course is a former home of WrestleMania past and probably WrestleMania future again here. But joining me to talk about this, Joe Aguinaldo. Joe, I posted something in our Facebook group and on my social media as well. I called it disappointment viewing because you're old enough to remember a time like I am where TV shows used to be appointment viewing. Thursday night, you had to watch this show. Monday night, as wrestling fans, we're still watching Raw. There is appointment viewing, but now in this digital landscape, we can virtually watch anything we want, anytime we want. So appointment viewing isn't as key as it used to be. But with an estimated 120 million viewers, or at least 120 million households watching the Tyson versus Paul fight, we can talk about the streaming issues another time. This was the thing people around the world, agree or disagree with it, were talking about. Now, you've watched the fights. I've watched the fights. Some people listening have probably watched the fights, and some people haven't and don't care. And that's fine, too, because there is a question of a moral ambiguity when it comes to the participants in the main event. Which, again, do you want to support or not for those reasons, which I think is a totally fair reason if you don't want to. But it was the thing that the whole world was talking about on Friday, besides the buffering issues. In your opinion, this, 4 hours?
Mm-hmm.
With 4 bouts, half an hour in between at least, each one, was this a satisfying viewing experience for you, yes or no?
Overall, I'm going to say yes, actually.
Okay, I find that interesting because of all the people in our cluster especially, I mean, the Greek guys are kind of into it a bit. I'm not huge in the MMA, and I am more leaning towards the boxing world, but to me, finding compelling boxing to watch that isn't one of these freak show things is a little difficult to find sometimes these days on mainstream. So why was this so compelling to you or satisfying?
Okay, and I can understand that you might be a little bit surprised. However, okay, let's look at this for what it is. This was not necessarily a boxing card, even though it was under that umbrella.
Sure.
Okay? It was an event. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you look at it that way, I got actually two pretty damn good fights in Serrano versus Taylor, and the one prior to that, I can't remember the two participants. Those were two pretty good fights. So
with terrible decisions in both.
Fair enough. But that's a judging thing. It happens in all combat sports. That said, those two fights from a boxing perspective, I thought were pretty good. Okay. I didn't agree at all with the decisions. So I totally understand where you're coming from there. And the main event, I mean, let's be real. It was a spectacle. This was not going to be a good match. However, what I appreciate about Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson was sports entertainment promotion at its finest. Like, you know what I mean? There was a guy you wanted to see get beat up. You had the nostalgia pop from the hero. Sadly, it was a disappointing fight, but I mean, like, what did you expect?
I get it from a personality standpoint. You can go back to Hogan wouldn't be as big if Piper wasn't as bad. Right?
Exactly.
I get all that, but who I really feel for this are actual people that are competing as boxers, who want to exceed and excel in their sport. Because what this tells me is that the competition doesn't matter anymore. The competition going up in the rankings and the standings doesn't mean anything anymore because some freak show can challenge some guy way out of their prime and make millions of dollars doing that instead. And people are going to care more about that than your entire effort as an athlete.
John Jones versus Stipe Miocic.
Right.
Same thing.
I know, but this is what I'm saying. Like, freak show marketing now is becoming what's passed off as sport. So is the sport suffering, or is, in the example of the women's bout, for example, and let's face it, that decision was purely just so they could get the trilogy out of this thing. You can try and tell me anything else, but they're clearly going to try and do a main event card. I wouldn't be surprised if Jake Paul is trying to promote that actual bout himself.
Right.
But there's no way that outcome made sense other than let's make it a three-way because we know if we get the third fight out of it, then we can get something really cool and get a buy out of it and pop a rating. So
see, and again, I'm torn because I know exactly where you're going. So okay, let's break this down. Okay, the pure combat sports guy in me is disappointed with regards to the decisions with all that stuff. Okay, totally 100% agree. Okay, like I thought that women's match, that was a total robbery, total robbery from from the decision perspective. Okay. But the other side of that coin is, and we talked about this sort of kind of with the Vince McMahon thing. If people are going to watch it, what's going to stop people from promoting it?
But that's the difference. And This is where I'm going to close on this and say that if we're promoting it as boxing, then we're promoting it as boxing. We're promoting it as a sport. They were saying that Tyson and Paul was going to be a sanctioned match. It was going to count, right?
I laughed when I heard that.
But they said it's going to matter.
I know.
It's going to be a real thing. All right. This is like you might as well just hand the NFL a script for the Super Bowl, or you might as well outline the plays for the Stanley Cup. Like, this is what it's becoming now. So does pro sports suffer? Does amateur sports suffer because of freak shows and all the attention like this it gets?
Again, I think it depends on your perspective, because if you are a boxing fan, if you are into the sport, same with MMA, same with anything. If you're into the sport, any sort of freak show is going to hurt, right? I mean, I think what it is it helps to a point, but then it comes to a point where you're like, okay, now we've crossed a line. And I think that's where like that's where it gets. There's that gray area there.
I get it. You can go on YouTube and go back and watch Tanya Harding beat the donkey bonk out of Paula Jones from the celebrity boxing matches in the 90s, right?
But that's not a boxing match, right? But people.
But neither was this. Neither was this.
It wasn't. But I guess the problem is the non-boxing fan, whether you like it or not, is going to be more interested in Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, as opposed to say, let's say, oh shoot, what's that box? Like there was a free boxing match that was just done back in October, and for the life of me, I can't remember the guy's name. I think
that's the problem.
No, but the guy's name was like Dmitry Bitov or something like that. But the dude is an awesome fighter. It was on for free. No one talked about it. Yep. And that guy is legit badass.
And that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Get that guy in the ring with Jake Paul. Get that guy in the ring with Jake Paul.
And Jake Paul is not stupid enough to do that. Like he wouldn't do that.
So the last question for you, Joe, today. Jake Paul announces another fight. Are you going to watch it?
It depends who it is.
There it is.
Look,
yep.
I am not going to lie and say that I think Jake Paul is a legit boxer. I'm not going to say that because I've watched enough boxing to know that there are levels to this. And Jake Paul could kick my butt. I'm not saying he couldn't. But compared to guys that have been doing this for years and decades, nah. And the thing is, Jake Paul, would not go up against someone he thinks will beat him. So
I did a celebrity arm wrestling match against Bret Hart years ago, early in my radio career, as a comedy bit. And as part of the comedy, I can say I hold a victory over Bret the Hitman Hart as comedy. The problem is Jake Paul is now saying he has a legitimate victory over Mike Tyson. And whether that means anything or not is up for interpretation, but he's going to run around saying that like it actually means something, and it doesn't. It doesn't. Does it, Joe?
And you're right. It doesn't if you know. But if you don't know, that's part of the brilliance of it, right?
All right.
This is pro wrestling 101 here, man.
Exactly. Everything is wrestling, to quote a good friend of mine, and this was exactly it. Joe Aguinaldo, appreciate your time, buddy. We are back with the Maharaja, Raj Dhesi, next.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
From WrestleMania to SummerSlam to Halloween Havoc to Starrcade, wrestling had its golden era from the 80s through to the mid-2000s. Legends and Champions is where we open the vault. Legends and Champions comes to you as part of the McGuire on Wrestling Network each and every week. Get your midweek fix. You can get it from all good podcast providers just by searching for McGuire on Wrestling. Why wouldn't you? See you there.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
This was an interview I hoped would always happen at some point, and I know we're going to see each other again down the road, so it's going to happen again. But ever since Raj Dhesi, who would go on to be known as Jinder Mahal, who would have that huge upset win, defeating AJ Styles to become only the second man to hold the WWE Championship from Calgary, Alberta in history. The other one being Bret the Hitman Hart. It's kind of a big deal. You put it that perspective, right? You think about all the names that have come through Calgary especially. But yeah, Raj, a.k.a. Jinder, got the job done. So earlier this year when he would leave WWE of his own accord, a lot of fans were kind of scratching their heads like, wow, bold move. But he did it, and he's doing it now. He's really just in the start of his big swing, working independence. He's showing up on all sorts of different shows, some with streaming shows, others doing great shows that are posted later, like what happens with Dungeon Wrestling in Calgary, Alberta, where he is from, where he came home to. And before the show, and remember, this is last week before I lost my voice, so I'll apologize now for my voice the way it sounds in this thing, but I had the chance to catch up with my old friend Raj, who, again, I haven't seen in years, but nevertheless came back and would go on later on that night to become the Stu Hart Heritage Heavyweight Champion. but we caught up with what's been going on with the Maharaja, Raj Dhesi. Well, it's a long ways away from the Nate Gym for the PWA. Former WWE champion and a guy that I can't say enough how proud I am to be sitting next to tonight here at Dungeon Wrestling. Raj Dhesi, great to see you, man.
Thank you. Yes, we go back quite a ways. PWA in Alberta. I started my career. We're here in Calgary, but Alberta is really where I started training. My first experiences in wrestling are here from Alberta. I have so many fond memories. A lot of the guys that you see here, I started training with them. And even when I was in WWE, I kept tabs of everything that's going on in the Alberta scene, all the young talent that are coming in, all the new promotions, everything. So Alberta was historically a hotbed for wrestling, and it is again now.
We had a hot time in the early 2000 aughts there. It was interesting to see how many from that class and that time of yours, especially, I mean, yourself, Harry, TJ, Natty, the list goes on of talent that came through Alberta as well. They would all go on to do great things. You were there, man, and now you're out. You're back home tonight. I mean, the news of you leaving WWE was one thing, but when the news came that you were coming here tonight, I think I was more excited for that than anything, because I know that, you know, you're very happy with the way your career's obviously progressed throughout the years, but at the same time, it seems like you're kind of taking it by the reins now and going where you want to go, doing what you want to do, and you know, enough about my emotions. How are you feeling?
Yeah, exactly. Right now, I'm just having fun, going where I want to go, and Calgary is always one of my favorite places to wrestle, and it's actually been several years since I've got a chance to wrestle here. I believe the last time I wrestled in Calgary was like 2016. So, after leaving WWE, I knew Calgary was coming up very, very soon on the schedule. But overall, I had a great experience in WWE, but now back on the independent scene, picking my own schedule. And
picking your own travel.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm not as young as I once was, so just having fun, keeping the schedule light, taking care of my body, enjoying some family time. I'm actually getting married in the summer.
Yeah, I met your fiance earlier, lovely lady.
Yeah, my fiance's here. My whole family will be here tonight. My parents, they haven't seen me wrestle in several years in person. A lot of my family is going to be their first time ever seeing me wrestle in person. So it's an exciting night. And here for Bret Hart, the Hart family, wrestling for the Hart family. I used to wrestle for Stampede Wrestling, along with PWA here in Alberta. I was Stampede Wrestling Tag Team Champions with Gama Singh Jr., so I have a lot of history here in Calgary. My coaches, Gama Singh, Jerry Morrow, Bad News Allen, Bad News Brown, like Stampede Wrestling mainstays for many, many years. So, I have that Calgary wrestling DNA in my blood.
Out of all that stuff, though, and out of all those years of wrestling here in Calgary with Stampede Wrestling, you're obviously familiar with the Hart family. You are the only other WWE champion to ever come from Calgary as far as men go. And when it comes down to the lineage and everything you've done, one thing you've yet to do is wrestle in this building.
Yes, exactly. This is my very first time wrestling in the pavilion. Obviously, I know all about the history of this business, the history of Stampede Wrestling, the history of this building. Stampede Wrestling was taped here every week. All the infamous matches are all from here in the pavilion. Like a memory that sticks out is Bad News Allen and he gave the pile driver to whose son did he give the pile driver to?
Oh shoot! You catch me on the spot. I know exactly what you're talking about, though. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll
edit this part. But
the promo after that, and the commission shutting down wrestling here in Calgary. They had to go to the Indian Reserve to wrestle. So just so much history here in Calgary. It's incredible. And all of that history, most of it is in this very building here. And when I walked in, just looking around, looking at the rafters, and just seeing the ring in the center of this building, and just thinking of how many matches we're here, all these historic matches. I believe the first ever ladder match was even in this building.
Yeah.
Maybe even the first ever triple threat, the Bermuda Triangle match was, I think, in this building. So a lot of history.
You're going to be in the main event tonight.
Yes.
No pressure for your first match in the pavilion. I mean, don't get me wrong. You've been in big pressure situations, and we will talk about that in a second. But again, and I talked about this in commentary. I'm going to talk about it tonight. I do want to ask about this kind of flex that you made earlier. A lot of guys will come and be like, hey, can I get tickets for my family? You're like, you know what? No, I want to support the brand. You bought 20 tickets for your family tonight here. That's a great message, not only as a wrestler, but as someone who wants to believe in the company as well. So when you're out and about and you're working for these companies and you see the efforts they're putting in, you realize that there's a business side to all this too.
Exactly.
How important is it to you to show like, hey, I don't want to just come and take advantage. I want to give back.
That's me showing my support for wrestling. Without the fans, without people buying tickets, there is no show. So that's me supporting the business, supporting the next generation of wrestlers, because I want wrestling to be in the pavilion for 100 more years. It's been already 100 years that there's been wrestling here. Let's have another 100 years, and the only way that can happen is if we support the business, we buy tickets, we support the wrestlers, we show up every time there's a show here.
Well, you know what? I know you got to get ready here, but I wanted to talk about supporting things. Like I said, when I saw my boy leave the PWA and go on to do great things and some different things. We won't talk about the leather pants, but I do have to say, as a guy that believes in supporting my guys, I got to pull this guy out here, right here. My Jinder Mahal WWE champion action figure here.
This is an elite figure, my one and only elite figure. You got it.
It's a great figure too, man. But, you know, seeing you with this, I mean, this is immortality. You know what I mean? This is literally your moment in wrestling history. When all this happened, take us there mentally. And I mean, people have said, you know, oh, well, they were going to do an India tour. They wanted to have him be the champion.
So
it seems like there could be so much more to that, though.
So the thing is, WWE does tours all over the world.
Yeah.
They make more money in one single show in the USA than they do of a show in India. A lot more.
Yeah.
So people can say what they want. They can take away from my accomplishments. That's fine.
No.
That's fine. But if it wasn't for getting released and having that transformation and getting that confidence, I would never have been champion. I was I was released 2 years prior. 10 months before winning that championship, I was not in WWE, and I believe it's the first time ever that someone's came back from being released, and in that short of a time, 10 months in my case, went on to become WWE champion. And that was actually my first ever championship in WWE. But again, it was me having the shift in my mindset, in my training, in my dieting, and really dedicating myself to the business 100%. Because if I didn't do that, Tour of India, anything, I would not have been champion.
Well, it was history, and maybe history made here tonight in Calgary. Welcome home, my man. I'll let you go get ready.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. You know the catchphrase, don't hinder Jinder. Well, I'll tell you right now, do not get in the way of Raj Dhesi, because he's got a lot of great things going. Still looks fantastic. The match will be up on YouTube within the next few weeks as well, so I'll be sure to share the link on our social media. But that does it for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. It is great to be back with you. Please do me a solid if you can, and the rest of the team as well. Stop by McGuireShow.com or wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, do that. Hit the automatic download and give a 5-star rating if you are so kind to do so. It is greatly appreciated. It's not for money. It's not for our egos. It is just to get more ears on great interviews like that. Until next week, we'll be back then too. Thank you for listening and letting me do what I do. Play safe, drive safe. Happy seeing ya!
McGuire on Wrestling. Online and on the radio. Listen to the show Mondays at 4 p.m. Mountain Time at CKXU.com, wherever you get your podcasts, and at McGuireShow.com.